But here's the thing. The algorithm is really good. It's really, really good. We all have problems. And yes, we're all trying to game it and get the best we can out of it. But like at the end of the day, what the algorithm does, I think, is incredibly impressive. The algorithm wants to find the best video for you to watch. You're trying to make a video that is going to be best sort of enjoyed by a person, right? So it's like you have the same goals. And believe me, I say, YouTube wants to plug the hell out of a video that it thinks is good, right? Of course it does, right? That's in everyone's best interest.
This episode is brought to you by Momento NFT. Momento NFT is a direct-to-fan social NFT app that allows fans to own viral moments from their favorite creators and unlock perks like meet and greets, autographed merchandise, and more. As a creator, you can easily create valuable images and video NFTs of your best social content. And as a fan, you can own viral moments from your favorite creators and unlock perks like meet and greets. Momento NFT is backed by Animoca brand Denza and Mark Pincus. Check out the app available on App Store and Google Play. You are one of the very few YouTubers that who have made it and then like keep making it until now. All your videos still are on very highly viewed. There was like millions of views, a couple 100K whenever you launch. So this is like this level of consistency is so hard to get there. I just want to put it out there. And then to start the show, you were originally from Missouri and then you were homeschooled and you kind of got into tech and then interested in tech when your dad gave you a Sony PlayStation. Do you want to share a little bit more about like how do you got into where you are? And I think in another interview, you mentioned that your mom are probably not really happy that you meeting people on the internet. Can you share a little bit more about how you grew up and then kind of how did you got on this path?
Yeah. So you're completely right. So I grew up in Missouri. I grew up in a family that was not very technically inclined. My dad was like kind of into video games a little bit, but even then not massively. So it was one of those things where from an early age, I had a real interest in gaming and tech and how it all worked. I always remember being very fascinated by like my Game Boy of like, how does this really work? Are these Pokemon really inside here? Like, what's going on with this? So it was one of those things that I think was always very interesting to me. And I think, especially when you kind of talk about sort of the early days of YouTube, it was different. It was so different, 2007, 2008, 2009. I mean, the whole space was so nascent. Most people who went to YouTube weren't looking for creators to follow. They're looking for a SpongeBob episode or whatever to watch. It was very early days. And so for me, it was like, I had an interest in technology. I had an interest in the concept of creating technology and creating or technology-based content. But it was one of those things where it wasn't until the iPod Touch came out, when the first sort of app store came out, that I really actually had like a way to kind of try that and test that. Because previously I'd spent my time in the writing realm, right? So I was like probably 10 years old or so when I started writing my first stories. And for a very long time, through most of my sort of teenage years, tech and gaming, all that kind of stuff was very much sort of a sort of side kind of thing. Like I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to write books. I wanted to write novels. I wanted to write. And that was something that was really exciting to me. So when I discovered YouTube, when I started making some content, that sort of instant gratification of creating a thing, putting it out there, and immediately getting feedback and views was so addictive compared to the very solitary writing process, at least for me, where I would just be in my room writing. And then maybe I get a friend or two to read a little bit of it or something, but it was on a completely different scale. So for me, that was kind of the prologue, if you will, for the story of kind of, that's where I learned some of the skills that I was able to transfer over to video, because especially like my first videos were all scripted and whatnot, because it was essentially I was writing an article or a story about this thing and I was just reading it out. So those are kind of some of the things that kind of helped me at least get from kid who was interested in technology and writing and gaming and everything into, oh, I am now a creator, even though that word really didn't even exist back then.
There was one thing that you said really, really interesting was you can get immediate feedback instead of after you write for 45 years a novel published. And then
Yep.
It was really interesting about you is you were analyzing these all the time, right? Like, so I heard from your interviews that you guys would have like a giant Excel sheet and then basically everybody would analyze every day's data. And then when you were back in time you created like really serious, like I don't know, it was little film or something like, and then you would cancel the project because of it. It just spends just too much time to make a 4 or 5 minutes video. I feel like being a YouTuber or like being a creator, when the outsiders looking in, it's like you just create whatever you have in your head. It's kind of like, oh, you just, well, he or she just filmed something in the room, blah, blah, blah. And then, but people don't know how much work goes into it and the planning, the writing, like you said, and then the filming and then the productions. At the very beginning, can you share a little bit more about how you kind of put yourself through this learning journey to turn yourself, like how did you film your first video? And then like at what point do you feel like you were good enough to actually making it a career?
It's different back then. And I think it's gonna be a little bit of a theme today, where 2009, which is when I started officially making videos, especially on the tech side, the barrier for entry was arguably non-existent. Look, you did not have to make good content to get views in the early days. I didn't make good content and I got views, right? I mean, it was very, very straightforward. In the early days, I did not have a camera. I did not have, I mean, I had the microphone that I had from Rock Band for PlayStation. I had a $400 Windows Vista computer with Windows Movie Maker. I had an iPod Touch that I could take screenshots with. That was my entire set of gear. Now, if you started with that today, you'd have zero, nada, no shot whatsoever, right? But back then it was there was so little competition, right? And nowadays, you know, obviously things have evolved a lot, but for me it was like I wanted to make content. I started making content with, you know, again, I was sitting there writing up my application reviews. I would load up 20 screenshots in Windows Movie Maker and be like, hello, so today I'm talking about the blah, 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 blah. Like it's terrible. No skill really at all when it came to video production. But the thing was, because it was so much easier back then to get started, I was able to just keep making it and getting a few views here and there and stuff, which was really motivating for me. And then from that point on, I was able to just continue to kind of build everything I was looking for, right? So it was like, yeah, there's definitely been a huge evolution in the content, but the main thing was just the consistency and just trying to constantly improve things, right? And I think that's a really important lesson that if anyone who's watching or listening to this could take away from, it's like, if you're passionate about something and you believe in yourself that you have the ability to break through something, the consistency and the sort of persistence, I think, is massively important. I would say it probably took me 4 years, maybe 5 years to start making videos that I was actually happy with. I had so many sort of criticisms of my own content. I mean, obviously you are the least objective person when it comes to your content on the face of the planet, right? I really do believe that. You always either think it's too bad or too good or whatever. Like, you just can't be, I think, particularly objective about stuff that you make. And maybe some people are. For me, I can't be objective. I know that I always have biases on this video is going to be great and it does terrible, or people are going to hate this thing and it gets like 1 million views. I'm like, great. So like, I think that's definitely a thing. But if you if you constantly are improving, if you're constantly improving your content, if you're being really real with yourself on why did this video not do what I thought it was going to do? Why did it not get received the way that I thought it was going to receive? Not just the superficial, like, oh, well, people didn't click on it. Or, well, okay, then you should have made better marketing angle, better title, better thumbnail. Oh, people didn't like it because they didn't appreciate it. Well, sucks for you. You're making content for other people, not yourself. So figure it out, right? I think those are some of the most valuable lessons that I think are really broadly applicable outside of just even, you know, making content online. But it's like, you've got to make stuff that people are interested in, right? You're not here to make videos for yourself. That's just not what this is. You've got to make stuff that other people are interested in. And it always starts with a good idea. You have to market that idea and you have to execute it, right? It's not that different than most things in life. You know, if you're any kind of remotely creative endeavor, you're running a company, whatever, come up with an idea for a product, market the product, make sure people buy it. It's the same kind of thing. And I think in the early days of YouTube, I was always very much hung up by the idea of like, oh, I'm so special. I'm making content. It's so different. It's like, no, you're making at the time, a very early prototype of a business, right? You've got to go and you've got to do things and iterate and work on them until they're ready. And so I think it's important for people to think about, especially if you are considering making the leap from a passion to a career. You got to take it seriously. And I just think a lot of people will have bits and pieces of that kind of philosophy, but they won't follow through. And to me, it's like, if you really put the time in and you believe in yourself, you have a shot at this. But if you kind of do it sort of you're kind of bumping along and you're like, oh, I'll do this or that, or you're making a lot of excuses for why things aren't working, whatever. I feel like those are the people who I'm just like, I'm sorry, but I don't know how you're going to be able to take that next step until you sort of change your mindset. Sorry, I got a little fired up there. I'll take it down a notch, but yeah, it's one of those things that I see a lot, and it drives me crazy. You can't do it half-ass. You gotta really fully commit.
Yeah, totally. I think there's a couple questions. Number one is there any YouTube channel that was really inspirational to you? Or like, did you ever have like any mentorship from people that are kind of like in the industry, kind of showed you how it's actually being done in the past? And another part is like, when did you find out your own niche? Because in my opinion, you're kind of like one of the OG creators who do tech reviews, and like, what is your like unfair advantage when it comes to creating in that niche? What do you feel like you are the top like 0.01 what 0001%, or like I think you are like, based on the numbers, based on like how people view you, I feel like you're definitely one of the top channel that's pretty up there. So like, I mean,
Thank
I
you.
want to,
Thank you.
yeah, I'm sure so
No. I know. It's like there's still, I think, thousands of creators who are bigger than me out there. So I certainly don't think it's that massive. But yeah, so for the mentorship side of things, it's a little hard to say because honestly, it was kind of that sort of thing where I felt like I was kind of growing up with the platform. Quite literally, I was 16 when I was making my first content, right? So I literally was growing up with the platform.
You are super young, by the way. If people
Yeah.
don't know, you just turned 30, right? Like,
Exactly.
and then you've been doing this for over 10 years. Let's be real here. And then your mother have to sign something for you when it was like you were under 18
Yep.
to go to do this YouTube seriously. And then, you're a lot younger than like what you look like because of you're on YouTube for so long. So,
well, thank you. I'll take that definitely as a compliment. Yeah, but I think it's one of those things where, growing up with the platform was very helpful because I think I was able to make a lot of friends in those very early days who I still am very close with today. And a lot of those people ended up turning out to be very, very successful, more so than I am, right? So I think it was one of those things where it was much more so of a growing, not a like someone was able to sit down and mentor me. That being said, there certainly have been some people throughout the years who I have taken an enormous amount of inspiration from. I think Lou from Unbox Therapy, especially kind of in I'd say kind of the midpoint between when I started and now, was massively influential, right? Just sort of his like philosophy on things, his sort of energy on whatnot, and just the way he thought about the whole space completely just sort of opened my eyes. Someone else who I will say I take a lot of inspiration from is Mr. Beast. Surprise, surprise. I think 90% of YouTubers would agree with that too. But sort of in speaking with Jimmy briefly, it's really interesting to see just the way that he thinks about content. The dude is so unbelievably driven, probably to an unhealthy degree, if I'm being honest, but it's been successful, right? Like that's what he does. Like this is his life, right? And that's what he eats, breathes, and sleeps in a way that I think a lot of people will say, but not a lot of people will actually do the way he does, right? So I think there's certainly some elements of that, and I think it's always worth sort of growing and learning. But I also do think that it's one thing to hear advice. It's one thing to maybe perceptually know what you should be doing, and it's a very different thing than actually executing and doing those things, right? And I think a lot of people do get kind of caught up in the like, I am talking about it, I'm reading this book, I'm doing all these things, but I think what a lot of people don't do is actually do the thing, right? Which is, I think, one of those early sort of things for me is like, look, just make stuff, it's fine. You're not gonna like, unless you're doing something wildly ridiculous and stupid, you're not going to do damage, you're not going to hurt anything. Just make stuff and learn from it and constantly be working on it. Don't be indecisive. I think that's one of the things. You just got to do it. So
you mentioned about just do stuff, right? Like you mentioned that you kind of found the success or like found some sort of like you were happy about your video after 4 years after making it. In the past, were you just making content to make content? And like, you set yourself like a little agenda on like every single week, I'm going to push out one video regardless, whatever, how shitty it is, like it's out. Or, I mean, do you try to do like 1% improvement based on it? Or like, do you just launch, and then one day it just got like 2 million views and that's it?
Yeah, a little bit more of the latter, I would say. It was not a thing where like, this week I want to make a better transition, or this week I want to tell a better story. It wasn't ever like quite that granular. It was much more so just kind of like, I want to make a video that performs better. I want to find the next series. I want to come up with that next idea because, the thing with YouTube and with a lot of online content is that like subtle differences can be huge, right? If you tweak your thumbnail and it bumps up the click through and the impressions start to rise and then the algorithm starts to push it more, like subtle little domino effects can happen all the time. So and of course there's always just an element of randomness too, right? I mean, I've had videos that are ridiculously successful that I was just like, I don't know if we should even make this, right? Like there was a video we did, a Razer, it was probably 4 or 5 years ago at this point. They brought out a keyboard with a new type of switch. It was called an optomechanical switch. And jargon aside, it was just a keyboard that used a little beam of light where when you press the key down, it breaks the beam of light to slightly improve speed, right? We got it. It was very basic. It's a keyboard, right? Like it was difficult for us to make a whole video, but we're like, you know what? This is kind of cool, whatever. Let's make it. We kind of had a debate about whether we actually should make it. The video got 10 million views. That was a complete fluke, right? Complete fluke. If we ran the simulation of the universe 100 times, it got 10 million views once and it got no views the other 99 times, right? I feel very confident in that. But you know what? Sometimes you just got to try it. Sometimes you've got to learn. And that opened my eyes to, oh, you know what? Maybe we should be making more keyboard content. Turns out there's a lot of enthusiasts for keyboards, right? So I think it's much more so about constantly testing, tweaking, tuning, always treating it like almost a little bit of an experiment in a way, even though like we obviously have a channel that has a very sort of healthy size of an audience. And you're right. The consistency is a very important, right? I think my risk reward tolerance is certainly a little different now than it used to be because, we have sponsors, we have sort of minimum views that are very important, just for the health of the company. So I can't be out here doing random wild stuff the way I did in the past, but also the channel is 13 years old. I think if I was still going completely wild swings left, right, and center, the channel probably would have crumbled at this point. So I think there's certainly an element of evolution of your thinking throughout and kind of what you're comfortable with. But the other advantage is that as I've been able to build up a successful channel, I can put a lot of that energy into other side projects, other channels and whatnot, where I can be more experimental. And the nice thing is, as we've been able to grow the business and grow the sort of portfolio of channels, the learnings that we have from those other channels are directly fed back all the way through to the other projects, right? So I think it's worth always kind of working and sort of thinking about these things, but also being reasonable and not being completely crazy. There's no magic bullet. You got to use your head. You can't just make completely wild stuff, but improving and always kind of iterating in some form or another and learning and trying to apply those learnings, I think is massively important. But again, this is not YouTube stuff. This is just life stuff. This is project stuff. I think, again, it's worth mentioning that like this is, while there are always specific, unique things to whatever space you're in, so much of this is broadly applicable. And I think that that's something that I lied to myself for a long time. I'm like, this is so special. This is only YouTube. Like, nah, this is just a business. That's just the way it works. You just got to keep working on it. So I think, again, it's just that mindset's really, really important to keep.
Yeah, I love that. And then I feel you are really hardworking. And then I definitely feel there's a lot of just like the street smart goes into it. Like, I think it's not really technically system thing because you have to pick up the signal like right away than people telling you what to do. When it comes to like running your own business where you are, it's like significantly different than like the person from Missouri, assuming living in your parents' basement or something. So I'm curious, how many different stages have you went through and to get to where you are? And then right now, what is like a typical day for you since you have a team and then you have your own businesses and then you have to deal with sponsors? How do you kind of like structure your day to be this, basically this boss or, whatever business figure?
Yeah. So for how a day is structured, it's massively varied. So for today, we're recording. It's 9 o'clock in the morning. This is my second recording of the morning. So I had a chat earlier today. We're sitting down and chatting here. I've got a meeting to get to with one of the companies. Then I got to go to the office. We have to finish up a sponsored video, which we started on yesterday. Fun fact, most of our shoots take a couple days because fun thing about tech is that it rarely works really smoothly. So it's almost always we have to build time into the schedule for like, okay, we film this part, then we cut, and then we go, okay, let's actually clean it up and fix it. Then we come back the next day and it's magically solved. So yeah, so that's the main goal today. I've got a video to shoot for our other channel, which I'm doing later this afternoon. Then I get off work and come back home, and then I have about 2 hours of email and whatnot to do, and then I'm gonna go watch some House of Dragon. So that's my day. That's my day today, but it's very, very different. You know, like I was traveling all last week, which was nice to go and catch up with a bunch of people and do a bunch of events and stuff. So it is probably, especially if you ask my team, a little bit uncomfortable at how much flex there is. But I think you kind of hit a good point earlier of it's just, you just got to be, I hate that idea of hustling, but you got to be working. You can't kind of just be taking a nap in the middle of the day or whatever. Like, especially when you have a team, you have all these million things pushing and pulling you, you got to prioritize your time, but also I do think it's important to give yourself some time. And I have, a family now. I have a 1-year-old. So it's like,
oh my God.
yeah. So it's like, there's a lot of work to do.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. But there's also things that are more important than work, and that is the family, right? So it's like, the balancing act is always, I've never gotten that right. I don't think I'll ever get it right. I'm always pushing and pulling on one side of that equation, too much or not enough or whatever the case is. So that's kind of what the day looks like. But as far as how the company has been, I'll tell you, I would say my job now is much more so a president of a company than a content creator. I don't really like that. I'll be honest with you. So we're up to a staff of 11 now. We just got a brand new office. We've got 3 active channels that are live right now, plus a side company. We have a number of smaller projects in incubation. It's a lot. It's a lot. Honestly, it is too much for me to handle. It's not sustainable at the moment, right? So I think that's one of the things of just like, I'm trying to find that right balance. And it does feel like I am constantly on the hamster wheel as I'm about to fall off every day. And it's not healthy. I'll be super honest. It's not healthy. It's not the way it's not even like, I think what I'm really good at. I don't think I'm a great manager. I don't think I'm a great I'm not good at a lot of this. I think I'm much better at sort of being on camera and doing this. But the problem is that I think for the way that things have grown, the things that have been sort of set up, it almost is more important for me to be doing those more businessy things than the actual content, because it's like, I'm the only one who can do a lot of very important things in the business. And doesn't need to be the case. There's certainly a lot of things I should delegate. I should sort of teach other people to do and whatnot. But you know how it is. You know that you know how to do something, and you know that, yes, I'm going to have to teach someone and I have to trust them and everything. It's like, no, I'll do it myself. I'll do it myself. And I think that's important, especially as a creator who starts as a solo, and you got to do everything, right? You got to be the lead editor, shooter, producer, host, writer, account. You got to do the accounting. You got to do the finance. Like, you got to do everything early. And of course, and I think it's a good skill set to kind of grow up and be the solo everything, because you at least kind of know everything. But I think it's also equally important as you grow to delegate those things, to hire smartly, to trust in people, and be able to build things out. But man, it's hard. It's so hard. And it just, yeah, that's a lot.
Oh
There's
man,
always a lot of stuff.
I totally feel you.
Look, the idea of having someone to run the business is smart. I will say, if you've got the right person, that's a smart thing. Because again, Mr. Beast's time is much better spent thinking about and executing ideas than telling a producer, sitting down doing a year-end review, or the more business stuff, which, let me be clear, massively important, right? That's not his skill set. That's not his real talent, right? So I think that's smart of him to kind of separate things. Might not fully agree with exactly how he does some of that stuff, but the idea is sound, right?
Yeah.
But it's difficult because it's like, when you build something like this, it's your baby, right? It's something that you have poured so much of your effort and attention into. Like, I was having a chat last week with a really good friend of mine who's also a creator, and actually it was a couple people, and we were all kind of in the same kind of spot of like trying to picture, like, what happened if you sold the company? What happened if you walked away from it? Like, what would your life be? And they were talking about like, oh, I'd be doing this and I'd be doing that, and I was thinking like this has been my life since I was 16. Like, I can't mentally extract myself from the company and the channel. Like, I literally, like, it's so ingrained. I obviously know that nothing lasts forever, whether people don't want to watch my stupid face anymore, whether there's a million reasons why, things will stop for whatever reason, right? You never know. But I think it's one of those things that sort of, especially now that, I have a kid, I just turned 30, like, it's been such a integral part of my life that it's one of those things where I'm starting to kind of unwind that thought process a little bit in my head of like, look, am I going to be doing mystery tech when I'm 60? Probably not, right? Let's be real. There's going to be a day where that is no longer going to be what I am personally going to be doing. So, yeah, I don't know. I think it's interesting. It's tough. Like this all, there's no playbook. There's no real way. I mean, you certainly can look at the way that certain things have been done, but I don't think there's ever really been a class of people who started out doing everything, being the host, being the face, doing all these kind of things, transitioning into like kind of what's that next step, right? And you can see some of the early creators who have, maybe they're running a Minecraft server empire, maybe they've started a company, maybe they've kind of gone off and done this or that or whatever, but there's not a lot of people who have built a huge brand, spun it up to be fully self-sustaining, and then really step back, right? I can one person off the top of my head who has done that, and even then there's still someone involved. So it's like it's a very sort of early time still for kind of that next wave, especially because the market keeps getting bigger and bigger. And you see influencers who are taking advantage of their audiences to sell these products that are unbelievably successful, right? You look at, what Feastables has done, what Prime has done. It's like, these are basically billion-dollar businesses that have just appeared out of nowhere. What? That's a thing? That is, I'll keep my language. But wild. That is wild.
Yeah.
Right?
So, are you gonna launch your own technical gadgets? Is this where you announce that you just did like a, I don't know, XYZ collection?
No way. Here's the thing. I have mad respect for those guys. I will say the people who are doing that successfully are a tier up for me. Like, I'll be super transparent with that. They are a tier up. Mr. Beast is probably 4 or 5 tiers up from me, realistically, right? So the problem is when it comes to doing your own lineups of physical product, scale is really important. Like, you've got to be very confident that you can push big numbers, right? You got to be very confident in that, because the problem is I think we're all so spoiled by online creation. You make the thing, you press the button, it's distributed across the world, boom, you wash your hands of it. When you get into physical stuff, when you get into distribution, you get into manufacturing, you get into the logistics of making the thing and getting it to the place where it needs to be, it's wild, right? And that's, I think, one of those things that as a creator, it's a valuable lesson when you start to overreach throughout your career, right? So we've had projects, not physical based, but like video projects. I think you actually had mentioned one earlier where it's like, as a YouTuber, you think, I'm a filmmaker, I can do whatever. Netflix docs, easy. And then you try to make one, you go, I suck at this. This was a mistake, right? And we've had projects that were grand in scope, and I had this great idea. We have this cool thing, and let's just execute. Let's go shoot it. Let's go make this thing. And we failed. Almost all of those huge projects have failed for different reasons, mind you. It wasn't like we were just, blindly doing the same thing over and over again. There were different reasons, and some were legitimately not up to us on why they didn't come through. But most were, like, in hindsight, obvious. You look and you go, man, what was I thinking? That was so stupid. But I think those are valuable lessons, right? Because, okay, I'm going to tell a story. I probably shouldn't tell a story. I'm going to tell a story. With merch specifically. The last merch drop I did sold one t-shirt. One t-shirt. It was, mind you, a while ago, 5-6 years ago, right? But the audience was still large at this point. Here's the problem, though. It was a t-shirt based on a very dumb joke that me and a friend came up with. And I'll be charitable and say the design was terrible. And no one bought it. Like, no one. I'm serious. One sale that was not like friends and family and, me stuff. That was a very eye-opening experience, because you figure that's the natural course, right? You're a YouTuber, you make, your shirts and your mugs and blah, 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 blah. But I think it's also worth thinking about, okay, from your audience perspective, yeah, you might have a lot of people watching you, but do they want merch? Do they care that much? I would argue probably not in most cases, right? Now, if you're smart and you come up with a product like Feastables or Prime or whatever the case is, that's a little bit of a different value proposition, because first of all, you got that massive scale, and you've also got yourself a cool product. It's not just a shirt, it's not just a hoodie or whatever the case is. Like, it's actually something that's really real. It's actually like, this is a product, like, actually, so my main shooter, so we were talking about, I don't remember why I got brought up, but we were talking about like energy drinks and stuff in the office a couple weeks ago. And she brought up Prime as just like something that she had just tried. And she's like, oh, I kind of like it. I'm like, oh, the Logan Paul thing. She's like, what? I go, Prime, like that's Logan Paul and KSI string. She's like, it is? I just bought it because I saw it on the store shelf. And it's just like, you would never have that moment with a Austin Evans t-shirt, right? You never have that moment with sort of that more traditional YouTuber merch. And, you look at people like Linus, who have now, mind you, leaning pretty heavily into his brand, but has sold like 90,000 of these screwdrivers, right? And just like, however many thousands of these like $350 backpacks and stuff, right? Like they've got a real merch business where it is, it's kind of that sort of, I think, that middle line between sort of leaning into your brand, but also making something that anyone can appreciate. So yeah, it's a wild time. I feel like I went way off topic there, but it's like, I think it's valuable to know your limitations and to know where you should be investing your time, and where, if you're not very confident in something like that and you're trying to build a brand, and physical stuff is expensive and it's slow and there's so many downsides to it that you got to be sure that that's going to be worth it. And in my opinion, the people who can really do that are the very, very, very upper echelon of content creators who can really do it successfully. And I think that if you're not there, and I don't think I'm personally there, it's not a incredibly worthwhile pursuit, because you just can't, like, the scale is wild. Like you got to really have something amazing and have people really into it. But yeah, that's the story of how I sold one t-shirt.
Well, I feel like you would do a lot better when you're selling a tech product, right? Maybe you can
Sure.
do what I assume what Ryan Reynolds does. So basically, you can be like a co-founder of like a XYZ tech product company, and then you just put your face on top of it, and then you're essentially play the marketing and sales funnel, but like the other person does all the distribution and then like actually making the product, right? I don't really buy that much t-shirts. I could buy, I mean, we all have a lot of t-shirts, but I feel like if you are just tapping into your niche, as all your audience are there for your tech reviews, and then if they can just feel like, okay, so since Austin knows so much about the tech products, and then if he make one, I would think this is like the best XYZ stuff, right? Like,
yeah, well, certainly some other people in the tech space have followed that exact sort of model, right? So Sarah Dietschy just launched her lineup of accessories in collaboration with Moment. And I know that she's still in the early phase. It's only been launched for a little bit. I don't actually know if she's shipping. I think she's just kind of getting through the first, was it Kickstarter, Indiegogo, whichever platform she launched it on. But that seems like it was very successful. You look at people like, Bitwit, Kyle, he's had a number of runs of like desk mats, which I know are very popular in the community. And of course, you've got, really Linus, who has got a very successful merchandise, physical retail kind of brand, or not physical, but like, physical product brand, where he has the shirts, but he also has the desk mats, the screwdrivers, the backpacks, he's got all kinds of stuff. He's got children's books around tech, right? Like, it's just,
that's crazy.
He's got a full store, right? He's got a full store. But I guess the things that I look for there are like what that ROI is, because again, the amount of time, money, and headache that these products require, massive, right? Again, I don't think most content creators really wrap their heads around like what the stress is of spending $50,000 to develop a product, another $100,000 to buy that product, and then stressfully watch a shipping container on a boat get stuck in customs for 3 months as you got angry people waiting for their product to show up. Like, it's a big risk, and it's a big thing. So I just think about the scale. I guess personally, sort of my instinct on that is that yes, there are certainly reasons why I could personally be doing a lot of this stuff, and we've dabbled again since we've sold other shirts since the first one, mind you. But it's just one of those things where the ROI isn't quite there for me personally. It just doesn't, like, the amount of time and effort that takes. I just think it's difficult when instead I could just make 10 videos for the same amount of effort, and that's going to make way more money and be way more meaningful. Now, mind you, that's a little bit of a short-term way of thinking, I'll fully admit. I think the long-term thing would be, let's start building this brand now, and then in 2, 3, 4, 5 years. But I think, as we've seen for some of these really dynamite successes kind of out of the box, if the audience is there, you can launch it today or 3, 4 years from now or whatever. And if the environment's still the same, then you could see massive results. So I don't know, that's just kind of my thought on it. I will say I'm certainly a little bit of an outlier, though. I think I'm a lot more pessimistic on merch and physical product than the vast majority of my peers. So take it with a grain of salt, but that's just kind of my personal experience.
Okay, so I have a question for you on all these like videos that you're producing, you have multiple channels, and then you are also working with the brands. How, I guess number one is, what do you feel like would make a viral video? Like what kind of video? I mean, how do you kind of structure? What is like your
Yeah.
thought process on engineer that? And then number two is, since you're working with a lot of brands, what are some major monetization strategy that you're applying? Would you just do, let's say iPhone review, so you can land a deal with Apple in the next month, or how do you kind of,
Oh,
how
yeah,
does that
yeah.
shape you into your content strategy?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I guess to answer the second question, first of all, I do try to keep some separation from that, right? So I
Hmm.
won't make Apple is probably not a great example because Apple doesn't pay anyone for anything. But say computer company Y, right? I'm not
Hmm.
going to make a bunch of computer company Y videos ahead of time and the hope that I would get a brand deal with them later. For one, I don't think it really typically works like that. At least in my experience, the brand deals have been generally much more led by like company, talk to the marketing team, talk to the agency, let's find influencers. Like it's usually a little bit more of that kind of funnel. And it's like what you do is almost irrelevant. Like at the point you're like, okay, cool, we've got X number of dollars. We want to go find influencers. They just kind of go down the list. So I don't think that kind of stuff makes a huge difference. It does somewhat, but not a huge difference. But the other thing is just I do want to be sort of authentic to the audience. So
Hmm.
yes, there's certainly videos that I make. They're maybe a little bit more political in nature. Maybe I got a product early and I want to make sure that I continue to get that access in the future. So I want to make sure, hey, let's look at it. Let's do some kind of content on it, just almost more of as a courtesy if I think it's something that's actually interesting. But I do think it's a little bit of a slippery slope. You don't want to be too sales pitchy. You want to be real with your audience, right? Of course, we have sponsors. Of course, those sponsors dictate what we talk about in those sponsored pieces of content. Yes, but I think the audience generally gets that, right? The audience knows this is our job, this is how we company works, and we don't just partner with any random brand, right? Actually, I did a video. I did a video on this recently. I did a video on testing YouTube sponsor scams. And essentially what I did was I just literally opened my inbox, went through a few weeks of just random pitches and didn't respond to any of them, but instead went out and purchased all those items and just looked at them all. And a couple of them were okay, but most of them were trash, whether the product sucked, whether it didn't ever show up, whether the service was sketchy. Like it's just, that was one of those kind of fun things. But I think it's a little look at kind of if you went full chaotic evil and just said yes to everything and just tried to cash out. I think the audience would quickly realize this is a garbage town channel. I want to go
Hmm.
down that whole path. So yeah, I think it's important to kind of be honest and sincere with your audience. And when it's
Hmm.
something sponsored, obviously you have to disclose it. But it's not just
Hmm.
disclosing. It's like make smart decisions. If you've got a good payday, if you've got a good sort of brand to work with them, do it. But do it in a way that is smart, that's being honest with your audience, and that is not tainting your other content. For that's certainly way too
Hmm.
strong of a word. But I think you just need to be really honest and like legit with your audience of like, hey, this is the thing. Hey, they're sponsoring this video. It's great because XYZ. And then you move on to whatever else. I don't think you need to kind of build things up.
How do you engineer a viral video?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. You don't. You don't. You just don't. That's anyone who, unless you have something that is legitimately insanely wild, it's difficult to engineer something that is viral. You can engineer something that is going to perform well, or at least has a good shot of performing well. I think that's reasonable, but that's difficult. Let's be real. It's difficult to be able to come up with stuff. I think it's all about like we've had some videos that I felt very confident in, but those videos are almost always about a topic which is going to be big, right? Like, when the
Hmm.
Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5 in 2020 were launching, we knew that was going to be a big year. Like, straight up, we just knew that was going to be a big year for the channel. Massive amount of interest. We'd really tried to position ourselves well to be ready for that whole year of, they announced the price, that's a video. The controller comes out, that's a video. A rumor comes out, blah, blah, blah. Like, there was a lot of content we can make throughout. But engineering something that's viral, I think, is much more so about starting with a unique idea, maybe not unique, an interesting, cool idea, right? It's got to start there. Next up is how do you market that idea? How do you create the title? How do you create the thumbnail or the multiple options that you kind of have loaded up? Once those two are kind of settled, then you make the video. Then you make the very interesting, engaging piece of content, and then you ship it, right? I think that's kind of the flow that we've had for quite a while. And I think that a lot of people are starting to kind of pick up on it. I know a lot of people are kind of following that kind of same thing. And it's good because that's the way things should be done, right? I think a lot of YouTubers, especially a lot of people who've been around for a long time, I won't name any names, but a lot of people who I'm pretty close friends with will still be in the mindset of they'll make a video, they'll hit the upload button, they go, okay, I should probably make a thumbnail now. And it's just like, what are you doing? That is crazy. That's like they make the Avengers, and then before it comes out, they go, all right, we should probably make a trailer, right? It's like, what? No, that's not how that works, right? So I think most YouTubers are starting to kind of come around to it, but I think it's important to just try to engineer the idea, then the marketing, then the video, and then execute that. That's really the smartest way. And I think most people are kind of getting behind that now.
Totally. Are you in terms of marketing? So since thumbnail and title are probably like two of the most important things.
Yes.
What does your content diet look like to help you kind of figure out like what will make people click? And do you kind of like study the advertising,
yes,
commercial stuff, or like?
Oh my God. So okay, I'm gonna be careful how I describe this. We have a project that we have seen a lot of success with, and a lot of that success was rooted in some styles from advertising from like the Mad Men era, right? So some of the font choices, some of the colors, some of the composition was very much because we try a lot of things, right? And we have other people who do this kind of stuff. I won't get into a lot of detail, but like we try a lot of stuff, right? But this is one of those things where we landed on a style that was, again, that very much that kind of that Mad Men era of advertising. And it was successful for a reason. But, you know, as I think a lot of things come in trends, kind of come and go. But I think when it comes to marketing on YouTube, a big part of your sort of challenge is making content that stands out. Everyone has a thumbnail that has a bright poppy color, a surprise face, a thing. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? There's nothing wrong with that. That works because that is sort of the meta at the time. But when you have something that stands out, people are scrolling through. You know, I've heard metrics that like, you know, people spend a quarter second or a third of a second as they skim by your thumbnail, right? So they don't really have a lot of time to look at it. So much of it is about just grabbing the attention, grabbing like huh, what's that? And then once you kind of get them to pause, they actually maybe spend another second reading the title, looking at the thumbnail, kind of spending a little bit more time to think about whether or not that's worth their click. And that's, I think, the point where you have to kind of have that sort of interesting, unique element. And then you also have to have the substance behind it, where someone sees something that looks kind of visually interesting or unique, go, oh, and then they read and go, click, right? So those are kind of the two phases of making something that looks different and stands out, and then also communicates an idea that people find interesting or funny or unique or just worth their time, to be completely frank.
I really agree with you. You know, you can't really predict what's going to be viral. And then I also feel like it's so shocking to hear like you would use Mad Men era as inspiration, because I would think maybe like nowadays, since everybody's like looking at TikTok or like all these other technology, that like are people looking what's the future, like the metaverse or something. And then you are looking at getting inspiration from the classics. That's really interesting. And when it comes to people who help you make the product or making things happen, how do you meet your team? Are those people started with like as your fans and then like you kind of get in touch with them, or are they more like professionals that you've seen, let's say like they have worked on XYZ project? The other day I was chatting with another big YouTuber and then they just hired people who work on, should I name names? But let's say like sure. Ellen Show or something.
Yeah. I have been making stuff for a long time, so I'm fortunate to have a lot of very talented and successful friends. So I've kind of been able to build that up over the years. So it's been easier for me as sort of I was able to grow the team. There certainly was an element in the early days as I started to grow, where it's like, oh, I'm going to tap into this person because I know you from years ago, and then this person because it's you went to school with this person, and et cetera, et cetera. Certainly there's a point where that kind of falls away and you're putting out job applications and interviews in the exact same normal sort of way that you would interview for any other kind of position. But yeah, that's definitely a part of it. I think if you can lean into people, especially in the early days, I think the most important couple hires you're going to have are that first person or two, because that's really going to set the stage for the culture. It's going to set the stage for what they're going to do as you kind of start to release some of things that you've got to do. Once you give up some of your babies, you're like, all right, you can edit this video, but I'm going to finish it, right? Just get it like 80%, or, oh, you can work on the thumbnail, but you know what, maybe I'll make one too, or, whatever the case is, right? I think it's important to kind of have those kind of of thoughts as you grow and to do it smartly. Because let me tell you, once you start doing, once you start turning this to real business and start hiring people and stuff, the decisions you make early set the stage forever, right? And I look at some of the mistakes that I made in those early days and setting company policies and just sort of the general kind of demeanor, just all that kind of stuff. And there's so many things I regret doing or not doing, and that now I'm like, people are used to it being this way. This is not sustainable, or this is not healthy, or whatever the case is. And now it's just like people get used to things, right? Once you do something a certain way, people expect it to be done that way, which is the way the world works, right? But you as a boss have to think like, I've set this up in a way that is not good. Maybe people are getting burned out. Maybe people don't feel like they're being valued. Like there's a million things like that to think about. So yeah, I think it's just very much just worth being thoughtful and especially a little flexible in the early days of building your company, and do it with an eye to what is this going to look like when I double, when I triple, when I quadruple my headcount, right? Is this sustainable now? It's a couple of us. We're hanging out, whatever, late. What happens when you have 10 people and they're like, hey, boss, I haven't been home. I've been here for 17 hours. It's like, you can't do that, right? Like, so you got to really try to set the foundations, I think, well. And if I go back and talk to myself in 2016, I would have a lot of advice to that guy. I'm like, man, you about to mess up, boy. You gotta chill. You gotta chill.
I feel you. At what point did you realize who your audience are? You are very successful at your channel, and then until maybe the most recent years, people are starting focusing on getting people on email lists or in some way to collect the information. But you've been really popular all throughout these years. Did the core audience change, or did they just keep growing up with you?
Oh my God, they change every month. I would almost say, well, man, it's a little exaggeration. Constantly, no, it's a constant churn, right? So if you looked at my YouTube analytics, if I showed you some of my YouTube analytics, how many people do you think unsubscribe or close their account or whatever per week? Just taking just a wild guess, right? There's like 5.2 million subscribers or something. How many people do you think unsubscribe or bail from the channel on a weekly basis?
100K. I'm just kidding.
Oh, no,
because you said a lot, right? Like,
no.
I was
nowhere near
thinking
that
like
much.
50K, or I don't know, because you have a really big base. So
yeah,
it's a really hard to guess. Like, I can't really just be a million, right? Like, that's possible.
It's nowhere near that much. It's about 1,000 people. About 1,000 people every
that's
week.
That's not bad. Like,
yeah,
that's
well, okay.
Really...
It seems like that, but here's the thing: those are active subscribers, right? The much more fluid number is the impressions, the active viewers, right? Which is a very different thing. That's correlated, but it's not the same as subscribers, right? That can widely vary. So one of the metrics that I really try to track are the impressions in the first hour of a video going live, right? That tells you a lot about kind of what kind of shot YouTube is giving you, right? Because I can have the world's best click-through and AVD, blah, blah. I can have all that stuff, right? But ultimately, it's all in service of YouTube serving your video to more and more people, right? And so that's a metric that fluctuates a lot, right? And it's not always necessarily a bad thing. Like, for example, I had a video go live like a month ago. It was on like the new PS5, and the impressions were like the lowest I'd seen in like 3 years. It's because I uploaded the video at 2 a.m. and 6 hours later, everyone woke up and watched the video, and it was a success, right? So it's not a be all end all, but especially when we generally launch videos at the same time on the same days and stuff, it's fairly comparable. And I think one of the things that's interesting there is like, if you have some momentum, a good string of videos or a good video to bring some new audience in, YouTube will usually give you a better shot, right? I mean, you might have all your core metrics be the exact same between a couple of videos, but if the channel environment or the overall YouTube environment, which is something people I think don't give enough credit to sometimes, if there's some crazy thing going on and there's 500,000 people watching some Logan Paul live stream or whatever, there are less people who are going to see your video, like straight up, right? Like it's settled. Or if there are, say your arch rival is posting a video 1 minute after you, which has happened to me, your video is going to get wrecked. It's just going to be out competed or whatever the case is, right? So there's definitely those kind of bigger factors to consider. But yeah, I just think it's one of those things where it's really, really worth thinking a little bit about kind of your strategies on some of these things and understanding what metrics you have. But you always have to look through them with a human touch. You can't just look at the number and say, this didn't do well because YouTube didn't give me the impressions. Wow. It's like, why? Is it because the algorithm didn't know how to categorize the video? Is it because the environment was low? There's a million reasons for it. You might not know what the real reason is. But I think a lot of people just look at that and go, well, YouTube sucks because the algorithm sucks, blah, 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 blah. And mind you, there are some very unique situations where there have been legitimate actual problems like that. But I would say that's a 1 in a 500 shot that's the real issue. It's almost always something that is either in your control or at least something that is knowable and something you can learn from for the future.
Totally. Do you group your audience into one group? So like, let's say you launch your video, you can just post in this group to make sure that you have like a certain amount of people doing this, right?
No, I have trust and faith in YouTube, right? I don't, when I post a video, I know it's scary thought. When I post a video, I don't tweet it most of the time. I don't post it anywhere. I hit the publish button, let YouTube take the reins. Now, mind you, I will watch that video closely for performance. But here's the thing. The algorithm is really good. It's really, really good, right? And yes, we all have problems. And yes, we're all trying to game it and get the best we can out of it. But like at the end of the day, what the algorithm does, I think, is incredibly impressive in that it wants to, like, look, you and the algorithm are the same thing most of the time. The algorithm wants to find the best video for you to watch. You're trying to make a video that is going to be best served or best sort of enjoyed by a person, right? So it's like you have the same goals. And believe me, I say YouTube wants to plug the hell out of a video that it thinks is good, right? Of course it does, right? That's in everyone's best interest, right? So it's like, I think a lot of people think about like, oh, I'm at war with the algorithm. And when you have a couple of 10 of 10s in a row and that kind of stuff, it does feel like oh, if only YouTube would give me a shot. But like the whole point of the algorithm is to deliver content to the audience, right? It wants to find the best content that you will enjoy most and serve a lot of ads along the way. And that's just the way it works, right? So I just think it's one of those things where for me, yes, I could have an email list and I could tweet it and everything. That's going to get such a negligible amount of views. I don't even bother with it, right? It's really about making sure that people are trained to know to come back to the channel, and people, when they see your video pop up, go, ooh, it's a new Austin video. Click. I can't wait to see what wacky hijinks him and the crew are up to today, right? Like that's the main focus, not so much the gimmicks or the oh, hey, everyone in the Discord, check it out. I mean, those kind of tools can be valuable, certainly, but I think just for me, it's just one of those things where I'm just like, look, it's fine. I'm just gonna just trust the channel, trust that to just kind of go for it.
I totally agree with you. You know, YouTube also want to promote your videos to the right audience. Okay, so I want to be mindful of the time. So we have a 1 minute last fire round question.
Let's do it. I'm ready.
Okay. What's your favorite book?
Oh man, I don't that's not rapid fire at all. My favorite like singular book ever. Man, I don't know. There's so many. I can I say series? Does that count if I put a book series? Or no?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, it's definitely fiction for me. I've always really enjoyed reading and writing fiction. I'd probably put the Game of Thrones series up there, even though obviously it's not finished yet. But the depth of the characters, and I mean, it's such an incredible world that I have read the whole series back. Well, it's been a little while since I've read them lately, but I've read all of the books and all the ancillary stuff back to front like multiple times. It's an incredible world.
Who made the biggest influence in your career?
Probably my first employee, Ken. That was the moment where I've been making videos for like 7 years at that point and done everything myself. And then when I expanded the team, I started working with Ken. It opened up so many things, and it was like a direct 1-to-1 correlation of going from 1 to 2, literally, and it's not really applicable these days, but it literally doubled the views after a few months. Like it just was, the output was better, the content was better. Like it was just a straight, mind you, I had been years. It was like one of those things where like I was so years behind making the decision to expand the team that like the whole channel was like bursting at the seams for more help and more content and better videos, all that kind of stuff. But that was definitely the moment where like things literally doubled in like 3 or 4 months. Like it was hilariously like just obvious that was such a needed decision.
How did you find him? And then what are some indicators that you feel like this is the person?
So I actually had known Ken from way back in the day. He also had a tech channel, in 2009, 2010 and whatnot. So I was a little bit familiar with him at that point, but he had sort of stopped making tech videos. He went off to film school and everything. We were able to reconnect later, and it was a perfect time for me where I was really, really needing help. I had been stubborn for so long, and I was struggling to put a couple of like 3-minute videos out a week, which was not the right move at all. And so he was like just getting out of film school, and he was like, yeah, let's do it. He moved out, and it just was like that. It was just immediate. And I got really lucky because Ken, I didn't know him massively well at the time, but I mean, he's a good personal friend of me outside of work, right? I mean, he's one of the people who I would really consider to be a good friend. And I think I got really lucky because he's a guy who has a lot of love and passion for what we do. I think he almost thinks about the company and things more than I do, which I think is incredibly valuable, right? And I didn't know that going in. I got lucky. I could have hired him and he'd been like, I'll just shoot the camera and whatever. That's it, right? But he's ended up being so much more than that, and I really value that. But yeah, I got lucky, no doubt. But I've gotten lucky many times over the years. So I'm very fortunate.
Well, I feel like you deserve these kind of lucky moments because I mean, 7 years of making YouTube videos are basically living in hell. Like that's a lot. So like, I'm so glad you found someone that's amazing for you.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you.
Who would you invite to your dinner party?
Oh, like out of anybody?
Out of anybody.
Oh man. I'd love to have a chat with Elon because that dude is on a different level. And I just think it'd be really entertaining. I mean, I bet that's probably the most common answer you could possibly imagine, right?
It is.
Definitely Mr. Beast too. Having spoken with him in the past, I think he's just got a really unique and interesting way of looking at things. I'd also put Lou from Unbox Therapy up there as well, of just like someone who every time I get to sit down and kind of talk with him, I always end that sort of experience being more motivated, thinking about things in a different way, like just opening up my horizons. I'm telling you, it is. I was able to have dinner with him not too long ago. It would have been the first time in a long time. And it was the exact same feeling when I stepped out of that dinner as it was the first time we hung out in like 2013 or 2014 or whatever, right? So I would say those three people, maybe not a party, it'd just be a dinner, but it'd be great.
Nice. Where can we find you outside of work?
Outside of work, taking care of my beautiful 1-year-old son mostly. Yeah, that's mostly it. Honestly, like there's not a lot of exciting things that I do outside of work, which mind you is fine because I do lots of exciting things for work. But yeah, I mean, I enjoy cars a lot. That's really been one of my passions since I was, a kid. I may or may not be sitting in front of literally thousands of Pokemon cards because I'm a weirdo collector who loves Pokemon cards still, like I did when I was 6. Again, surprise, surprise.
Thank you so much, Austin, for coming on the show. I've learned a lot from you, and then it's so fun to watch you talk about like the behind the scenes, as well as like it's so crazy to see you grow from a person making YouTube video when in your teens, and then now you already have a baby, and then you're still doing really well at it, and it's just crazy. I mean, I'm sorry, but like
no, thank you so much.
Longest YouTuber, like longest time YouTuber I've ever chatted with. Like,
oh wow.
The second one was like Laura DIY, and then it was like Grant Sanderson from 3 Blue 1 Brown.
Yeah.
And then they're all been at it for a long time, but
I'm old.
Yeah.
I get it.
No, you're very young. I think you all are the same age, but like still like in shock. But anyway,
well, thank you so much.
In a good way, by the way. Yeah.
Oh, I appreciate
so much, Austin.
Very, very kind words. Thank you very much for having me. I will say you've done a terrific job with the chat. This has been really, really fun, and hopefully people enjoy.
Thank you.